Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. You think House of Cards is a TV show? Sort of. Also kind of real, though, it turns out. Today, the FBI brought charges against the former director of security for the Senate Intelligence Committee. It was part of an ongoing investigation of secret information that has been leaked to the press over the years. The man in question is called James Wolfe. He was in charge of handling information as it passed from the executive branch to the Congress. Wolfe had access to huge amounts of highly classified information, including intelligence documents. Now, a job like that requires unimpeachable integrity. Wolfe is accused of leaking classified material to several reporters and then lying about it to the FBI. And it gets weirder from there. Allegedly, Wolfe passed information to a college student called Allie Watkins. Watkins later went on to become a reporter at several media outlets, including Politico, BuzzFeed, and the New York Times. Wolfe, who is in his 50s, has admitted having a relationship, apparently, with Watkins that went on for 3 years. Watkins has denied that Wolfe was ever a source for her stories, but text messages released today strongly suggest otherwise. Here's one, quote, "I always tried to give you as much information so you could get that scoop before anyone else," Wolfe wrote to Watkins. "I felt like I was part of your excitement and was always very supportive of your career and the tenacity you exhibited to chase down a good story." It goes on like this. It's pretty sad and a little creepy. I felt like I was part of your excitement. You know, you imagine these guys are sinister. It turns out they're mostly just pathetic. Though they are kind of sinister too, actually. The Russia hoax would not exist. It wouldn't have metastasized to take over our entire government, our entire national conversation, if corrupt bureaucrats like this weren't misusing their power, which they are. So it's hard to feel too much sympathy for this Wolfe guy. On the other hand, the feds once again are prosecuting somebody whose sole alleged crime is lying to the feds. It would be nice if our government went after people for real crimes once in a while. Might make you feel a little better about the system. The DOJ also seized phone and email records from a reporter in this case and apparently broke into encrypted text exchanges. Didn't know that was possible. Turns out it is. This all looks a lot like what the Obama people used to do. It was worrisome then, and it's worrisome now. When the government spies on American citizens, it is always a big deal, whether those citizens are New York Times reporters or whether they are Trump campaign staffers. It doesn't matter. There had better be a very good reason for spying on Americans. The media, of course, do not recognize this. They only care when it's someone who shares their politics. As far as they're concerned, conservatives deserve to be wiretapped just because they're conservative. The press are partisan buffoons who wouldn't know a principle if it got in the shower with them, but the point remains. Dan Bongino is a former NYPD officer and Secret Service agent, and he joins us tonight. Dan, if you would, since I know you follow this story more carefully than anyone I know, put this in context for us. How does this Wolfe character fit into the larger story?
Well, Tucker, the name of Carter Page he was relatively anonymous in this scheme. Carter Page had assisted the FBI in a prior case where they locked up a Russian spy in the Buryakov case. But the name was relatively unknown at that point. Wolfe's the one who leaks the existence of the name Carter Page. The name was there. Leaks the name to Allie Watkins, who then writes this story. The story is then, this is where it gets ugly, Tucker, and this is why the press has zero credibility in this at all. That story by Watkins is then cited repeatedly to advance the Pravda-like media propaganda story that Trump's cooperating with the Russians because Carter Page, now that they have the name, was a Trump foreign policy advisor. This was used over and over again. This is this circle of lies and deceit we see. And I agree with you. Your opening statement's spot on. I have a libertarian spine, and I don't care who's in office. I am always concerned about the freedom of the press. Period, full stop. But what I find absolutely hypocritical is media Pravda-like phonies complaining now about government overreach while you've been dead silent on spying, on the prosecution of Mike Flynn, on all of this stuff. Give me a break. You forfeited your voice to talk a long time ago.
Spying, but it wasn't spying. Remember that? When a paid government informant gathered information secretly on 3 separate Trump campaign officials and sent it back to the government without telling the Trump campaign. That wasn't spying. That was just the FBI doing its duty, right?
You know, it's amazing. I watched your interview, which is a classic, by the way, with police stater Eric Swalwell, the congressman from California, who, when he mentioned spying, you know, he actually said something that was true to you, Tucker. And to be fair, he's not here to defend himself, but he said, hey, we only spy on the bad guys. He was right. Trump was the enemy. This is the new liberal police state mindset. Trump is the enemy, not the Chinese, not the trade relationships with the Chinese, not the Russians. The real enemy was Donald Trump. He was absolutely right. This is the new liberal mindset. Trump is the bad guy, and you're right. As long as you're spying on conservatives, it's A-OK, and we'll play the euphemisms game. No, he was an informant. That's nonsense. He was a spy, and everybody knows it.
We used to have trials that helped us understand who was the bad guy or not. I mean, people were accused of things, and then it went before a jury or a judge, and we knew for certain. But now, the accusation is itself considered proof of guilt. When did that happen?
Yes, I'm glad you brought this up because, Tucker, remember, this is what frequently gets lost in this. Wolf's related to this Carter Page story. Remember, Carter Page is the entry point for the signals intelligence spying operation, the interception of the emails and texts into the Trump team. Tucker, nobody to this day has provided a scintilla of evidence that there was probable cause of the two things they needed to spy on Carter Page. That he was acting as a foreign agent or on behalf of a foreign agent, and secondly, in violation of U.S. law. Nobody has shown that. Carter Page is out doing cable interviews, probably tonight somewhere. This is nonsense.
If Carter Page was guilty, why hasn't Carter Page been charged? I mean, as you just pointed out, his behavior was the pretext for this entire story. So doesn't it tell you something that he's not even been credibly accused of a crime?
The FBI and the Department of Justice, Tucker, walked into a foreign intelligence surveillance court, used to effectively the Star Chamber, right? Used to prosecute the worst among us, terrorists, the worst savages on the planet. They bring Carter Page in there to spy on him, and you're right. He's out walking around right now. Matter of fact, the FBI is not interviewing him. I know of no controls on his behavior at all.
No, it's true.
The answer is because there probably is no indications of criminal behavior at all, and they desperately want that angle of it to go away.
And once you talk to Carter Page, as you may have, you realize how sad this whole thing is. I mean, Carter Page was never a Russian agent or an agent of anybody. I'm not even sure what he does for a living. I mean, it's pathetic. Dan, thank you. It's great to see you.
Yes, sir.
Ethan Behrman is a California radio show host. He joins us for the first time here in Washington, and we're glad to see him. Ethan, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Tucker. Great to be here.
So are you bothered by, and I said it right in the open, I'm bothered whenever Americans are spied upon by their government. Sometimes it has to be done. But there ought to be a really good reason. The press is saying that today. Why haven't they been saying that about the spying on the members of the Trump campaign?
Well, because there was a suspicion in the first place that the Russians were trying to infiltrate the Trump campaign. So there is a difference. I share that concern that you have. I'm always worried when the government is intruding on our individual freedoms. Remember, the right to privacy is actually still relatively new. 1967 is when the Supreme Court ruled on that, because it's not in the Constitution, a right to privacy. But here we have the Russians trying to interfere in our campaign. We know that. It's clear. We have 20 people who have been charged with crimes in the Mueller investigation so far. Carter Page maybe hasn't actually been charged yet, but the investigation is not over yet.
But does it bother you that, I mean, this is not an opinion. I think this is a fact from the information we have at hand, that Carter Page was the first link in this now very long chain of the Russia hoax. And so Carter Page's purported collaboration with the Putin government against the U.S. government, that started everything. So why is Carter Page, does it bother you that he's still walking around and doing cable shows, including this one?
Yes. I mean, yes, on one hand, if they had the evidence. But as we know from investigations, sometimes an investigation starts and you're down one thread. Other threads come out of that. Maybe the Carter Page thread went to a dead end.
Well, but the Carter Page thread is what allowed the spy, and you're right, of course, but the Carter Page thread allowed the spying by the Obama administration on a rival political campaign. It's got to be a pretty high bar for doing that. Maybe there are cases where you have to do it, but you never want to do that because it would shake Americans' faith in their government. But Carter Page's behavior was the pretext for that, and he's still free. So as a civil libertarian, you've got to think, wow, maybe they made a really big mistake in basing the spying on Carter Page because they haven't charged him.
Well, but then simultaneously we had the Papadopoulos situation, right?
But they haven't charged him either for any crime against the United States. They charged him for lying.
And that's the easy way out. You brought that up in the intro, right?
I'm bothered by it.
Where prosecutors take the easy way out sometimes, where it's easier to prove that.
I'm not partisan on this question. Yeah. I mean, it would be very easy for me to say, this guy Wolf should go to prison for lying, and maybe he should.
Right.
But I'm really bothered as an American by the fact that all these people, going back, as I always say, back to Martha Stewart, are charged not with the crime that undergirded the investigation, but on the basis of some conversation they had with federal agents. I mean, that's not fair play, actually, in the end.
Because the federal agents often know the answer before they enter the room.
Exactly, as liberals used to point out. So Papadopoulos has not been even credibly accused of betraying his country. So, like, where's the crime? Where's the real crime? That's a fair question.
Ultimately, the crime here is we have Russia attacking the United States.
But that's not a crime that the people who are spied upon committed.
Potentially, while Manafort was and his associate.
He hasn't been charged with that either.
Just additional charges again today because he immediately was using an encrypted messaging system. We have to assume it's something like a WhatsApp type thing that he was using to immediately try and get people to lie to the investigators. This is a real big issue.
I'm not defending obstruction of justice at all. But that is a crime subsequent to the original charge.
Right.
So what you still lack in this whole thing, and it should really start to bother all of us, just on principle, is any evidence that the underlying charge was true. Nobody has been charged for collaborating with Russia, for hacking our democracy. All of that stuff just turns out to be crap, actually.
Well, no, there's a difference between provable in a court of law versus the suspicion that something is going on. And I think that's the case with Carter Page at this point. There was a real suspicion going on because of his time in Moscow, his bragging about it, his participation in 2013 or his investigation in 2013. I think there was a lot there, and maybe it just hasn't fully
I know, but this
out.
is a law enforcement. I mean, this is not a cable news debate. This is a law enforcement investigation, and the end result ought to be an indictment. If there was a crime, indict the person for it. Prove it. You can't besmirch someone's reputation, make it impossible for him to work again, as they've done to Carter Page, without proving that he committed a crime. And they haven't. They're not even trying. Like, how dare they do that to an American citizen? Do you feel that way?
Well, I think that we need to wait for the Mueller investigation to conclude so we can see all of the information that happened here. Plus, some of it was a FISA court. You know, FISA courts are relatively secret. We can have the civil libertarian debate over how secret should FISA courts really be. But we don't know exactly what happened in the FISA courts because it's secret.
Do you think that Carter Page, from what you know, and we know a lot because it's been leaked by people like this Wolf character, do you think he did anything that should land him in jail, that should destroy his life? This has destroyed his life. Do you think that's fair?
I think if anybody is doing something to undermine the integrity of a United States election by trying to sell out to a foreign power who wants to interfere in our election, whether the foreign power succeeded or not, absolutely should be held to account.
I couldn't agree more. I see it happen here in Washington every day as we count out all kinds of different countries, Russia not among them.
Yeah.
So I agree with that. But I'm talking specifically about Carter Page, whose life has been destroyed. Do you think he deserves to go through what he's going through now?
If he was participating in attempting to commit that kind of a crime.
But if he wasn't, and they can't prove he was, then don't you think we all owe him a big apology? Like, hey, Carter Page, sorry we wrecked your life.
If it turns out
maybe you and Monica Lewinsky can go out to dinner and talk about what it feels like.
Or the no longer with us Richard Jewell actually is maybe.
I totally agree. I couldn't agree more.
Right, if that is the case. But as of now, we just don't have enough information.
Well, I hope someone is honorable enough to apologize to the people who we've destroyed and then discarded. And he would be on that list, along with Richard Jewell and Monica Lewinsky and Gary Condit and a bunch of other people whose lives were destroyed by a reckless and stupid media establishment.
But I don't think that this is entirely reckless. I think what we have going on here is some real things.
But he better turn out to be Putin's best friend, or else I'm going to feel bad about this. Ethan, thank you. Great to see you in D.C.
Tucker, thank you.
The mayor of Philadelphia danced for joy after a federal court said it was fine for him to ignore the nation's immigration laws and allow alien criminals to live in his city. So they solved all the other problems in Philadelphia, and to make it even better, they're going to bring in some illegal alien criminals. We'll unpack that next.